There's another entrant. All right. So I'll go ahead and remind folks that we are recording, and we appreciate our speakers coming and talking to us. And by recording, we're able to make things available to the folks who can't make it tonight. In fact, our vice president said he's in Chicago and he wasn't sure he was going to be able to dial in. But I'll go ahead and I'll mention to folks regarding our vice president, Robert. So he's going to organize our December meeting, which will be our annual holiday get together. We're going to try to combine both virtual and in person for those folks that want to meet up with Robert at Claiborne's. So we'll do that on Sunday, December 6th at about 3 p.m. So we'll post that, and folks that are interested can go ahead and RSVP to our regular HEAA Gmail account. And that way Robert will know how many folks to try to reserve a separate room for. And of course, we'll want folks to socially distance, but for those that are interested in getting together, we'll have that opportunity again. And then in January, we'll follow up on the first Thursday, January 7th, with another virtual meeting and start off the new year. And of course, like many of you, I'm hoping that the new year will be better. Hopefully we'll be getting vaccine soon, so we won't have to worry about the COVID virus. Hear different news reports, probably like all of you do, that there's a lot of work by a lot of different pharmaceutical companies that will hopefully bear some fruit shortly. Just like in the news from all the developments in the electric vehicle world. So it's really exciting to see those news reports all the time. Some folks may have seen the, I understand it was really just graphic images of the Hummer EV. So GM's going to bring back the Hummer, and this time it'll be an EV. There's been a lot of marketing sounds coming from Ford about their Mach-E Mustang. They're putting their Mustang name on the line. And that will, I think, mean a lot to a lot of folks. I heard both that first edition of the Hummer EV and the first edition of the Mustang EV, Mach-E, are sold out already. So folks have really been signing up for those. Of course, there's been a long sign-up list for every new Tesla that's coming out. And so we might be hearing more from Tesla regarding the Cybertruck in the near future. That's exciting as well. So we got a lot of news of those types of things going on. We're of course not only staying on the ground with EVs, we're going into the air with EVs. Different configurations have been announced by different companies. And I'm happy to present tonight Tom Calgaard. You can hear me okay, right, Tom? You told me that already. And he is the Senior Vice President at Bye Aerospace, and their E-Flyer sounds really exciting. As we all know, airline pilots were in great demand until the COVID pandemic reduced the desire for air travel. And unfortunately, that's probably going to mean a number of pilots retiring. So once we do get that vaccine, we will probably have a big shortage of pilots. And Bye Aerospace wants to address that. One of the big costs for someone becoming a new pilot has been their time as a student, because the traditional small Cessnas and other planes are quite expensive to maintain and operate. And the E-Flyer promises to revolutionize that. So folks are invited to ask Tom questions. You can either put them in the chat, and we will be able to then read those questions off to Tom, or you can if you want to ask in person at the end of Tom's 20 minutes of presentation, we will have 10 minutes of Q&A. And so that will be exciting. And I'm not sure how many more folks we're going to be getting, but I don't want to delay any. As I said, I've got to keep watching that admit to the waiting room. There's another. And let's see, call up my chat here as well. Okay. Zoom is pretty good in terms of we're able to scoot things around on the screen. We can have our chat, our participants list, and the video of those folks who choose to send their video all together. And so that's a convenient feature. Okay. So, Tom, with that short introduction I gave, are you ready? I can go ahead and have you share your screen.
Sure.
And that way we can get going. And Jeff, appreciate you being here. Well, I don't see you in your box. Oh, there you are. So after Tom handles his Q&A, probably around 7:10 or so, we'll ask you to pick it up at that point. All right. And another admit. Okay. All right, Tom, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for the time tonight. Happy to talk to you. Again, my name is Tom Calgaard. I'm the Senior Vice President for Strategy and Business Development at Bye Aerospace. And I don't know if you guys listen to this podcast, but it's one that I do from time to time. It's got a lot of good discussion on EV. So it's the EV, what's it called? EV News Daily. And it does a good job of covering, it's about 20 minutes, and it does a really good job of basically grabbing all the articles and condensing it into one kind of news report for you. So if you're interested in that, he's pretty upbeat, so it's fun to listen to. So let me share my screen, and I probably have about 15-minute discussion, and you guys can ask as many questions as you want. I have 3 little kids upstairs, and so my wife would prefer that the sooner I get upstairs to help her, the better. She's at home with them all day, so I'll be very efficient, but I'm happy to answer any questions. So my background, real briefly, I see a gentleman there. I think it was Douglas, has a bunch of space shuttle models behind him. I worked at Lockheed Martin for 12 years. I worked on the space side, so my background is orbital mechanics and spacecraft systems. Undergraduate, I focused on guidance, navigation, control. Did that for about 5 years. Then I spent another 3.5 years working for Jim Crocker at the civil space. I guess ultimately it was called civil space line of business, where I was strategy and competitive intelligence. And then for the last whatever's left, 4.5, 5 years, I was at the Advanced Technology Center in Palo Alto. I lived here in Denver, Colorado, but I worked for Ken Johnson, or I'm sorry, Dr. Washington, and then somebody else after he was replaced. Dr. Washington is now the CTO of Ford. Basically we were the skunk works on the satellite side, or on the space side. So pretty interesting career. I don't have any expertise in anything specific. I'm pretty broad. Everything from business development, venture capital, strategy, and a lot of things I'm doing at Bye Aerospace really expanded my role. So Bye Aerospace, we're a 40-person company in Denver, Colorado. We're out of the Centennial Airport, located just south of Denver. It's the second busiest general aviation airport in the country. And Dave, can you just give me a thumbs up? Everything sound okay so far?
Yep.
As far as hearing? Okay, great. So it's one of the busiest business aviation airports in the country, general aviation. During the pandemic, there were many days where it was the busiest airport in the country because a lot of people are flying private, whether it's Wheels Up or NetJets or any of the other Part 135 services. So who is Bye Aerospace? We're a company that you would consider in a startup phase. However, we have a lot of leadership that has we've brought over 20 aircraft through the certification process. So much like an FDA drug. So you talked about a vaccination or a vaccine. We have to go through a regulatory process. So unlike military aircraft, commercial aircraft have to go through a certification process. And so we have a team that's done a lot of that. So our vision is to be the world leader in electric aviation. So the Tesla in the sky, if you will. When you think of Cessna, Piper, Embraer, Pilatus, Dassault, there's all sorts of general aviation and business aviation aircraft. We want to be recognized as a leader. We also want to be the leader when it comes to electric aviation. So our vision is to do that. How we get there, we have 2 major core competencies. The first is certification, and the second is a rapid design, approach to rapid design. Unfortunately, there's some things I can't show you in this presentation today, so it's a scaled down version. Just from we don't have NDAs in place, and there's some competitive information we don't want to share. But ultimately, our design process, I will tell you, is very similar to how you design software. And so we have a very fast feedback loop. We have the ability to go from conceptual design into critical design very rapidly, basically going through preliminary design in about 2 weeks for those engineers on the phone. Basically what that means to the non-engineers, we go from what you see here. This is a conceptual design. This airplane will likely be a T-tail, so the horizontal stabilizer will be more, it'll look like a T basically. And we'll go through the outer mold line design, aerodynamics, the structural analysis. We'll go through that in about 2 weeks. And then we'll go into what's called critical design, where we basically are at the component level. So we go from large components and the overall outer mold line to inner mold line very rapidly. So our business is really focused on, one second, I gotta move. You guys don't see it, but it bothers me. I have to move it off my screen. There, I can see now. We have a family of aircraft. So we're working right now, as Dave mentioned, on the E-Flyer 2. It's a 2-seat airplane. It's ideally designed for pilot training. And what you'll find with electric aviation, as you go from the small airplanes all the way to large airplanes, for a purpose-built design, so not a retrofit, so not a Cessna 172 that you probably see fly overhead. You know, it's a 4-person airplane. It's used for pilot training. If you've ever gone in a single engine small airplane, it's probably a Cessna 172 or a Piper, Warrior, Archer kind of lineage. Anyway, we're 1/5 the operating cost. So when you think about retrofitting, you know, a traditional airplane, you don't get a lot of the efficiencies you do when you do a ground up clean sheet design. So just like the Model S was a clean sheet design for electric cars, we're a clean sheet design for electric airplanes. The E-Flyer 2 is 95% complete. We're basically through critical design phase. We're sourcing all of our components right now. We're building that aircraft out. Actually, you know what? I do need to bring up one other document. And I apologize for not having this in this document. It's worth showing that we have been flying. And so
very nice.
Let me just show this real quick. Obviously, it's going to be choppy from your end. You can go to YouTube, excuse me, and look up Bye Aerospace, and there's all sorts of videos. So this is our proof of concept airplane. This is basically an engineering test bed where we are flying our, you know, battery motor. Basically, it's in a full electric airplane, but we're just using it for flight test to basically characterize all of the things we expect to see in the conforming airplane. The conforming airplane, and I'll stop showing, even though that's probably what's most interesting to you all. Let me get this off the screen. That is the conforming airplane design. In fact, this is actually an older rendering, so this is not exactly what it looks like today. I would flash up what it does look like today, but I know you're recording, and I, again, for IP purposes, I can't show it to you right now because it's a stripped down view of basically the inner workings of the airplane. And by the way, for those that aren't familiar with aviation, your IP is your type certificate. So we don't need patents. Our IP is basically getting a certificate from the FAA saying this airplane, we're conforming to a design, and that design has been certified by the FAA. So that, you know, we can't just go build a Cessna 172 and sell it because we don't hold the type certificate. So it's IP that basically lasts forever. And there's a lot of trade secrets behind it. But back to our overall mission, you know, the E-Flyer 2 is focused on pilot training, and we don't have time to get into all the details, but I will tell you from 2023 to the end of the decade, we will hire more pilots than any time in history. That's COVID aside. And I have more insights into COVID, and obviously we need a therapeutic, and we need something that can prevent this, not just a vaccination. And so I know of other things that are going on, and I can tell you I'm very bullish on not the vaccine, but having some other solutions that will take care of SARS, MERS, COVID, all that kind of stuff that gets airborne. So I'm very hopeful that'll basically help turn around the aviation industry as well as the global economy. So we go from the E-Flyer 2, flight training aircraft, 2-seat, 450 pounds of usable weight, 3 hours of endurance. If you're flying faster, you're not going to have as much endurance, but your range is approximately the same. You move to the E-Flyer 4, which is in conceptual design. Once we lock down the critical design phase for E-Flyer 2, we'll move right into the E-Flyer 4. It's basically the same supply chain, same manufacturing techniques. And so it's really just a stretch of the airplane. And we can actually do a demo where we can show you how we're going to stretch the airplane in about 3 minutes in our design, within our design software, and how we bound our overall design boundary conditions. The E-Flyer X is a retractable gear, lightly pressurized. So this is the sports car of these airplanes. This is for the business person that wants to go from, you guys are all in Houston, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from Houston to San Antonio. It's just a really quick fly, pop over, or even down to Corpus Christi is probably a better example because it's got the longer range, get there quickly. It's an airplane that really helps you, avoid that 4 to 6 hour car ride. So if you're on the East Coast, this plane is ideal for, outside of Manhattan, there's an airport called Teterboro. Going from Teterboro to Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, basically avoiding having to fly down or to take a ferry or drive 7-8 hours inside of an automobile. And then we move to the Envoy. The Envoy is a twin, basically a replacement for the King Air 200, 350i. We think it's a great platform for both passenger, on-demand air taxi, and cargo. And for all of these airplane platforms, we have strong supply chains. So big name companies that are supporting us on the motors, the batteries. So when you talk about the Envoy, Safran, Magna X, Rolls-Royce, Honeywell, Denso. Honeywell Denso is if you look up Denso, they were one of the world leaders in electric motors. They partnered with Honeywell, about 12 months ago, and that's in the public, so you can look that up. But on the battery side, we're partnering with some of the world's best. We're using the M48 cells in the E-Flyer 2, which are the same cells that are in the Tesla Model S. That's one of the cells that it's in the Model S. Obviously, Tesla does other things with Panasonic and other companies. But what's the benefit of these airplanes? They're about 150 operating costs. As you go down, as you increase in size, it stays. It's very linear. So the Envoy, as I'll show you on the next page, is 150 operating costs of its competitors. The E-Flyer 2, same story. We're about $23 an hour to operate this aircraft in comparison to a 172, Cessna 172, which is about $110 an hour. So those zero emissions, if you're not familiar with aviation, these type of airplanes, that at least these first three, would use, if they're internal combustion, something called 100 low lead. So that is the fuel that's used for aviation, for the most part, for smaller general aviation piston airplanes. That contains lead. So not only do you have the carbon release in the atmosphere, which is not good, you also have lead particulates released into the air. So that's another major component, is the amount of carbon release will stop. So for pilot training alone, we believe we'll save about 5 million metric tons of carbon release every year. We're not getting to a gigaton obviously yet, but we are definitely starting to make an impact and show a roadmap to single aisle and even wide body airplanes later down the road. I'll show you our kind of our product roadmap here in a minute. So better performance, every airplane here, better performance. The one thing we don't compete on is endurance today. That's based on obviously the energy density and a drop of fuel compared to the energy density, and the equivalent amount of battery storage is not the same. That is increasing. I can't get into all the details, but if you look up a company called Oxys, they're a lithium sulfur battery. They're about 500 watts per kilogram today, which is about double what we're putting in most commercial automobiles. There's lithium metals. There's all sorts of new technology that'll come, and then you've always got hydrogen, which is another option. Another component of electric aviation is safer operations. So when you think of general aviation, people kind of think, oh, it's not safe. Typically, it's pilot error that is where the fatalities occur. But if there's a hard landing and things happen just right, I don't know. If, for an example, is it Dale Earnhardt Jr.? He was I think he was in a Citation CJ3 that caught on fire. But when you look at the statistics of small airplanes that do land hard or crash, a lot of people perish because of the post-crash fire. We believe that we've alleviated that problem because there's no fuel in the wings. There's no opportunity for combustion. The batteries themselves, they are, I can't show you the drawings, but basically they're safe through a fully controlled thermal control, liquid cooling. There is basically a thermal runaway event has to be maintained inside of our encapsulated battery packs. So just kind of follow my assumption that we don't believe that will cause a fire. So for that, we believe we'll be safer. We also have a higher aero efficiency. So if Dave was in a Cessna 172 flying at a mile above the ground, and I'm in a E-Flyer 2, and Dave loses fuel and I lose energy, I can fly for 20 miles before I have to land. Dave can fly for 9.8. So we have double the aero efficiency. We have half the flat plate drag of a traditional, and we don't use oxygen as part of our combustion because there is no combustion. It's an electric motor. So we have no air density issues. So we basically can climb, we do lose efficiency with the propeller as you climb in altitude because of air density. For these later platforms, they have variable pitch props. So the blades, you can control their pitch, which will then help with your efficiency. So very safe operations, better performance. I'll give you an example of kind of a comparison here. We're calling this the Envoy, and you're getting a sneak peek because we have not publicly announced this airplane yet. We have a lot of deposits on these airplanes. In fact, if I were to talk about our deposits, it's not like Tesla, but we have 711 deposits on these aircraft. In a time of COVID, we've put 400 new deposits on our order book, and these are non-refundable deposits, so different than a typical ground vehicle. These airplanes, it's $5,000 down for the E-Flyer 2, it's $10,000 for the 4, 15 for the X, and right now it's 25 for the Envoy down. And these are, early adopters, everything from air taxi, Part 135 operators. So think of, NetJets, but it's not NetJets. I wish it was, it's not, but it's somebody like that for the Envoy. We've got 11 Envoys. We have a term sheet right now for an additional 50, an additional 20, and there's an option right now for another 20 on these Envoys. So even though we're still far away from certification, people understand that we have the right pathway to, if you think of Tesla, they had the Roadster, then they had the S, and they had the X, and then they had the 3, and then the Y, and then so they had a pathway to get there. Same story here, same idea. But when we go back to actual looking at this business and cargo, when you think about Amazon, you think about the fulfillment centers. If you're in a location that doesn't have a fulfillment center, how do you do Amazon Prime? Well, there's feeder fleets for UPS, for DHL, for Amazon, for FedEx. Who am I missing? There's contracts for cargo, and usually it's less than 400 miles. It's 250 nautical miles typically is the type of trip. Well, this platform can do 500 nautical miles, so 900 kilometers or whatever the math is for miles. I do most of my conversions to metric, so I apologize. Statutory miles versus nautical miles. 500 basically gets us everything we need inside of the typical mission profile. We have a very similar volumetric room for packages in comparison to the Caravan. We fly faster than both of these airplanes. We're about 320 knots, which at 35,000 feet, you're cruising pretty fast for a propeller. And let's not even talk about what a turboprop or turbofan looks like for electric. That's a whole nother conversation because you don't have the same fuel. Anyway, I know I'm running low on time here, so I'll be quick. The big component here, look at the operating cost, $850 an hour versus 150. It's all about the fuel. It's all about you've got one moving part versus in an internal combustion engine, you've got, 500 plus moving parts. So the wear and tear, the vibration, it from a ground vehicle, it's just a lot more efficient, and the operating cost just goes way down. Environmental benefits we talked about. It's 30 decibels quieter. The E-Flyer 2 is in comparison to a 172 at 500 feet over. So you're not going to hear it. On a day where there's a little bit of wind and ambient noise around you, typical daily life in a city, you're going to see the airplane, you're not going to hear it. It's 1,000 times quieter. The Envoy actually eliminates 1 metric ton of carbon emissions in comparison to competing aircraft an hour. So that's a pretty big deal. So we're really excited about that. Here's our technology roadmap. So the way we're doing it, if you just start and look at the E-Flyer 2, we're focused on a very simple certification with the FAA. And as you go up in size with airplanes, they're going to get more complex. But we're going to be building off of the precedents and the knowledge, the tribal knowledge internal to our company that we already know how to certify airplanes, but specifically for electric, and working that through the FAA. The infrastructure, so charging, is going to be very simplistic around pilot training and how we then scale that from airport to airport. We have a plan for that. The motor and the battery technology is already there. At the pack level, we're about 220 watts per kilogram. To get to the Envoy, we need 500 watts per kilogram. Really, we need 400 really to close the mission profile. The cells we're looking at right now are already 500 watts per kilogram. It's the cycle life that's just not there yet. And so we have a pathway to get to the battery storage, the energy storage, but we're agnostic to the energy storage. We don't care if it's lithium ion, lithium sulfur, lithium metal, or fuel cells. So once fuel cells are capable, now fuel cells have a volumetric constraint, and you have a lot of other things you have to deal with when you're at altitude around thermal control. But when that is capable, now we have a longer range platform, and now we can get into narrow body, 50-seat regionals, and we can really start. So we think we have a really good roadmap to get to larger platforms that are all electric. So, today we expect to certify. This is our team. Let me go back real quick. We expect to certify the eFlyer 2 by September of 2022, October of 2023 for the eFlyer 4, and we think by the end of 2025 we can certify the Envoy. That's all based on right now we're in the middle of a $50 million capital raise. We've raised 25 million right now that we have signed closing documents on. The money's in escrow, and we're going through the final stages. It's international money, so we're going through the final stages of CFIUS. We've got other investors that are at the table. We're looking at site selections, everything from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Arizona. So we'll be building up a manufacturing facility at an airport in one of those locations. We're going to borrow about $20 million in debt capital to build out the first part of that facility and scale it. So I'm sure I haven't touched on everything you're curious about, but I've got 10 minutes to answer questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. Wow. To see that 50-seat airplane in your product line, that's amazing.
Yeah, and by the way, that's an Embraer. That's not our platform. That's just, we don't have a platform that we haven't designed what that would even look like from a conceptual perspective, but we know that we have a pathway to get there.
Okay, very good. So, question. You have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Tom. I'm sorry I missed the very first part of your presentation. How is certification going? Are you guys on schedule? FAA helping? Excited about e-flying?
Yeah, so the FAA is very at the top level from the administrator down through his direct reports are very, very excited. I will tell you, COVID has definitely slowed down the FAA, and we've taken a delay both from supply chain and from COVID or from the FAA because of COVID. Now, right now, the September 2022 timeframe I'm telling you is our current timeframe based on supply chain, based on capital, based on the FAA. So yes, they've been very helpful. They're leaning into this. They're pulling and we're pushing. So typically, well, I don't know your experience with the FAA, but this is, they're really leaning into this, and they expect us to really lead the way and be the trailblazers, the pioneers for this because they trust the team. Tom Bowen is the former chief operating officer of Mooney, which is over in Kerrville, Texas. Now Mooney's kind of fallen by the wayside, but he's got a great deal of experience and certification. John Knutson, who's not in this picture, but he's holding a pretend picture of him, is a former FAA attorney. Chris Schulte, who is in the picture, he's right here, this gentleman, he's a former FAA inspector. I could go on and on, but we've got a very strong connection to the FAA. And additional to these people, we've hired 8 people since this picture was taken when we could actually stand next to one another. And we've got another 15 DERs that are contractors that basically are third-party representatives between the FAA and ourselves. So they're designated engineering representative for the FAA. And so we have a DER for the power plant, a DER for the avionics, a DER for the composite material we're using, for the fuselage, for the structures and so on. So,
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. One thing I was wondering, Tom, you mentioned Texas in the running. Have you considered Ellington Field in Texas?
Ellington Field? You mean the old NASA site? Or I guess not the old NASA site, but the NASA site?
Well, NASA uses it among others. Yes.
Yeah, so no, we have not. At this point, we're down to one location, and I don't know what's gonna happen right now. There may be some things that we're gonna rule Texas out. I don't know yet. I'm waiting to hear back. So we're hopeful, but we'll see.
I just thought the irony, since they relocated the Lone Star Flight Museum to Ellington Field, it had been in Galveston, and then the hurricane kind of chased them away from there. They built further in that. To have the old planes and the most new planes all together would really be something.
Yeah, I was there in 2004. Doing 2003 and I don't remember if it's 2003 or 2004 now. I'm getting older. Doing the Vomit Comet. It was the last year of the KC-135.
You did that too. All right, very well.
Dave, you're on mute. Does anybody have other questions? Happy to answer some other questions.
So in the chat, besides Kevin's questions here about the certification, let's see. How many E2 aircraft per year do you plan to make? Kevin's asking. And then we'll get to
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How many E2 aircraft per year do you plan to make?
Yeah, so we want to scale production well beyond 1,000 airplanes a year. The E-Flyer 2 and the 4 are going to have very similar. If you're not talking, could you go on mute? There's a lot of background noise from somebody. I don't know where they're at. The E-Flyer 2 and the 4 have a very similar supply chain, very similar manufacturing process. So between the two of them, we expect that we'll be building well over 1,200 airplane a year, which will be a big change from the current production at other OEMs. Back in the 70s, 60s, and late and early 80s, excuse me, there were about 17 single engine airplane manufacturers, and they were building about anywhere between 12 and 18. I think it's 16. Yeah, 12 and 16,000 airplanes a year. Last year, I think there were, in our class here for the E-Flyer 2 and the 4, there were probably about 1,000 built globally. So it is a big change. Cirrus built 715 SR-22s and 20s, which are similar to the E-Flyer 4 in size, back in 2007. And that's kind of the scale. That's kind of the most that it has been built, kind of from a single plant that's composite in a long time. So we understand what we have to do. And anyway, so that's kind of the numbers.
Okay. And Ken Jones, you said you have a question?
Yes. Is Carl Lawrence any part of your team? So Carl Lawrence.
I don't know that name. I apologize.
That's
Carl
fine.
Lawrence.
But it's great you've assembled a great set of experienced folks to get your company off the ground. So
Absolutely, yeah. We had Charlie Johnson, who was our chief operating officer up until last year when he retired, and he was the former president and COO of Cessna. And then we have a whole host of folks that have supported. I'm talking to a bunch of advisors that have done similar things in the past, and so I don't have the experience, but they do, and I'm definitely trying to avoid. I'll have scar tissue when it's all said and done, but I want to try to avoid some of the mistakes at least.
Okay, more questions from folks.
Hey, Tom, this is Jeff Ebert. What is the most
Hi, Jeff.
important performance attribute for the batteries? Is it energy density? Is it cycle life? What do you need out of your batteries?
It's a mix, right? If the energy density was 1,000, or I guess a kilowatt per kilogram, that would be great. But if it only had a cycle life of 20, that wouldn't be good either. So, it's a mix, right? Cycle life plays into it. For the E-Flyer 2 as an example, with the traditional lithium ion, so we're using LG Chem M48s currently is what's currently in the design that's going to get a TSO or part of a certification. The pack itself is about 220 watts per kilogram. We expect that the operations will really take place between 40 and 80% state of charge. And so that's where we're going to charge all day long. So we're never going to have to charge back to 100%. So we can do DC fast charging, and we're not going to really charge above 1C. And so we think it's a pretty benign, and we have a full closed loop thermal control system in the battery pack to keep them all at equilibrium. We have really good thermal control at the passive level and at the active level.
Do you happen to know what the cathode chemistry is in those?
No idea. You're talking to an
Okay.
aerospace guy. You
I've-
just crossed the threshold of my knowledge.
Well, unfortunately, we could probably go on for an hour if we knew some of that, because that's where my mind's been thinking when you pulled that slide up. There's a lot of ways to tweak that, which is really what I'm about to talk about. But yeah, we should connect, because there's some ways. I know some other LG batteries that might be a lot better, just because the cathode chemistry is going to be a little bit different. You might get a lot more power per pound there.
And
Yeah.
if you'd like to connect, I can share your emails with each other.
Yeah, please do.
So Tom,
Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned thermal, and there's a question, what are you doing for cooling, air cooled or liquid cooled?
So the motor is now air cooled. We were using a liquid cooled system, but now it's air cooled, which is also easy for certification. And just very quickly, you're gonna see it for. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Hold on. I'm gonna show it for just a second, and you know, you could always go back and let's see. I don't know if I have a good picture. Well, I don't. There's a very, very small inlet. The design, it's not this picture. It's actually different. We've changed it and updated over the last month. And there's some announcement that we're going to be making very soon. So the motor is air cooled, and the battery system is liquid cooled. So we have a closed loop glycol fluid
So
water.
battery-
Basically, it's a liquid. It's a water and glycol mix. I think 50-50 basically that goes through and cools. There are 21700 cells. You know, in the future we might do prismatic, we might do pouch cell. Right now that's what we're using. And you know, the next gen cells for the Envoy are all pouch cells. But again,
Okay.
lithium sulfur has a lot less heat and a lot less thermal issues than the ones we're using now.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I thank you very much, Tom. I think that this has been very educational for all of our members. As I think I mentioned to you in email, we've got folks from all different backgrounds. We've got folks from Canada tied in, and I could easily see people flying your planes all around North America. So
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we've got 100 deposits. We've got 110 deposits in Canada. So yeah, happy to answer questions if you want to feed them through Dave later on. If anybody's interested in potentially putting down a deposit for an airplane, let me know. And if anybody's a high net worth individual that is interested in investing in aviation, electric aviation, if you're aviation in general, I would say don't ever invest. But I think we're different, and I think we have a really good value proposition. So if there's any interest, we're looking at $1 million+ investors, but just feel free to contact me. Otherwise, I'm going to go eat dinner and hang out with my kids. So thank you very much for the time, and have a great night.
yep, we appreciate it. And you can stop sharing, or I can click on stop participant sharing, either way. Okay. And we are good to go. Thanks so much. And we will turn it over to Jeff. Jeff, you've got all that battery chemistry knowledge floating
sir.
around in your head.
Yes, sir. Let me go ahead and get this started up here.
Okay.
So it's going to be a heavy dose of chemistry. Let's see. Is the slides? And now let me switch it to. Okay, how's that? Does everybody kind of see the first slide?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on myself. I want to spend all the time in the slides. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ascend to everybody. And then I'm going to do a little bit of science, and then we're just going to have some fun going through some really cool results that we were able to discover. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm actually pretty excited to share some of the research that Ascend has done here to help improve the performance of lithium-ion batteries. We're going to focus tonight on chemical additives and how they're developed. And hopefully I'm going to be able to do two things for you. Hopefully I'm going to be able to show you how hard it is. And then also try to show you the significant value that can be created for the consumer when you achieve improvements in lithium ion batteries. So let me run through the introduction of Ascend real quick so you kind of know who we are. So Ascend, is it moving through? I guess I got to press the arrow. All right, so Ascend is actually the largest fully integrated nylon 6.6 provider in the world. You may have heard of our Viadyne products or some of our newer products. They're actually back integrated into all their raw materials, which makes it very easy for us. And they're also the only large-scale converter of acrylonitrile to adiponitrile. So that's important for us because the conversion of acrylonitrile is actually how we make our Trinohex Ultra. So we also have a very nice global presence. Dave, the slides are moving forward, correct? Because I can't see you guys anymore.
Yes.
Okay,
You're
awesome.
working fine.
All right. So we have a very large global presence. We're fully integrated across the globe for our nylon intermediates and specialty chemicals. We've recently had some acquisitions in China and in Europe, and we recently opened a facility in Detroit that is dedicated to electric vehicles and the automotive industry. So a little bit more on that. This slide here is actually a summary of all the areas where Ascend is engaged in improving electric vehicles. There's way too much detail and way too many places that we could talk. We could talk for an hour just on this slide. So I'm not going to get into it right now, but I will point out in the bottom left corner, you'll see the word Active. Active is a product we recently launched that has a lot of antimicrobial behavior. And it has been woven into masks and into filters. The filters will go into the vehicles, and the masks work really well at preventing any kind of antimicrobial issues. And Ascend recently donated 5,000 of these masks to the University of Houston's football team so that they could proceed with all their football activities this year in a safe manner. So I'm going to stick around at the end. For anybody who wants to, we can come back to this slide and we can talk as much as I know about a lot of these areas for as long as anybody wants to. But I'm going to try to move through these slides so that I can show you guys some interesting things. So let me go ahead and try to introduce Trinohex Ultra and then explain what makes the development quite difficult. So this is basically where we started with Trinohex Ultra. We knew it was a chemical called 1,3,6-hexane tricarbonitrile. We knew it was non-hazardous, which is really good. A lot of the chemicals that go into these batteries are carcinogenic and hazardous materials. So being able to displace them or replace them is actually pretty good for the batteries. We knew that it had a very high boiling point, which comes with a high flash point, which is also good for the battery systems. And it comes with a very low melting point. That's awesome because a lot of these batteries get tested at low temperatures. So right in the middle, you can see a molecular structure of Trinohex Ultra. That molecule is also very hygroscopic. That's important to the batteries because if you can suck the moisture out and hold on to it, then it won't affect the cathode and the anodes negatively. So this is actually one of the literature documents that was sent to us from the Harvard Institute of Technology. And in it, they very clearly state some value in 1,3,6-hexane tricarbonitrile. So research on this molecule didn't start with Ascend, it actually started before Ascend, so it was well known. And you can see in the upper right a very simple diagram of one of the things that it does in the battery. It actually protects the cathode material or the electrode material from degradation. And you can see in the far upper right, just 1% of Trinohex Ultra improving the cracking and the pitting on the electrode material. So in the bottom right, we put together a little diagram to kind of show you what's happening there. So when you form the battery, there are layers that are formed around the cathode and the anode, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of seconds. So this diagram basically shows you on the bottom right the Trinohex Ultra forming that layer. Those CN molecules represent Trinohex Ultra, and it's preventing a lot of these harsh molecules in the battery system from attacking the cathode material and ripping off your lithiums and degrading that. That's essentially what's happening. Now, it would be awesome for Ascend and for me if that's all I had to do to go out into the world and promote the Trinohex Ultra. Unfortunately, it isn't. And what you have to actually do here is develop a set of baseline conditions that make presenting your information to multiple sets of customers, somewhat applicable to their testing. And the issue there is that there is an ocean of configurations and recipes and chemistries that go into these lithium ion batteries, all different types. So you're essentially going to have to boil the ocean down, find some commonalities, and then do some testing. And so this is how we did that. I'm just going to kind of show you how we did it, and a lot of other folks are quite similar. So we looked at some specific places in the battery. We looked at electrolyte conducting salts. We looked at electrolyte solvents. We looked at cathode chemistries and anode chemistries. So electrolyte conducting salts, that one was fairly easy. We chose lithium hexafluorophosphate because it was one of the most standard electrolyte conducting salts that you'll find. This salt is the salt that's actually dissolved in the solvent to help conduct electrons. All right. Electrolyte solvents were actually fairly easy for us to choose as well, because really what you're looking at here are carbonates. Carbonates make up the majority of electrolyte solvents that you find in lithium ion batteries. For us, we chose ethylene carbonate, ethyl methyl carbonate, and dimethyl carbonate. And there's a lot of acronyms in this presentation. At the end of the presentation, there's actually a glossary of acronyms that will really help. If anyone's following along, and you can set up 2 windows and you're having any issues with the acronyms, have that glossary out there. That'll definitely help. We chose this ratio of ethylene carbonate, ethyl methyl carbonate, and dimethyl carbonate because you get the best balance between flash point modification and dielectric constant. And the dielectric constant is important for getting your conducting salt into solution, keeping your ions in solution. And the flash point's important for stability of the overall battery. So this is a really typical one. You may see propylene carbonate mixed in if you ever see a recipe. But the cathode chemistry was where we had to spend a lot of time. So the cathode is one of the most expensive pieces of the lithium ion battery, and the battery itself is the most expensive part in the electric vehicle. So a lot of effort is going on in all different aspects of the lithium ion battery industry to try to reduce the cost of the cathode. One of the ways that's happening, and we see that happening globally, is the reduction of cobalt. So what we did was we took a look at NMC, which is lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt. NMC started out in a ratio of about 1:1:1. So when you see when you see the NMC and then 622 after it, the 622 is actually the ratio of nickel, manganese, and cobalt. So 60% nickel, 20% manganese, 20% cobalt. And then 8:1:1 is 80, 10, and 10. So a 50% reduction in the amount of cobalt. So this is a very standard, very strong cathode that's out there right now being utilized in electric vehicles, but there is a push to get to that 8:1:1 to help reduce costs in the cathode. And actually there has been probably 2 different 8:1:1 cathode types out there. There's an 83% nickel and there's an 88% nickel. And most people are around that 88% nickel, even though it's a more difficult cathode chemistry to optimize. But Ascend chose to go ahead and try that 88% nickel in their optimization tests. We also chose to look at nickel, cobalt, aluminum, which has a different cost structure, but a very different performance structure. The voltages that can be applied to NCA are very different than the voltages that can be applied to NMC. For example, NMC 622 can range from a very standard 4.2 volts all the way up to a 4.4 volt system. But NCA really struggles above 4.2 volts. So you have to be careful how you're building your package and what you're trying to design it for. It's easy to always reduce the voltage to improve those harsh conditions, but if you can achieve those higher voltages, then you can get that higher energy density. LFP is lithium iron phosphate, and it's one of my favorites. To me, lithium iron phosphate is like the punching bag of the cathode industry. It's very strong, very robust, can handle a lot of fluctuations, but it is limited to some lower voltages. But you're going to see a lot of lithium iron phosphate in some very key industries. Lithium iron phosphate is already in EVs in China, and you're starting to see lithium iron phosphate penetrate the energy industry in these devices called grid energy storage devices. I will talk a little bit more about grid energy storage devices and LFP when we get to those slides. I have several of those for performance testing. And the last one that we decided to do some testing in was LCO. Lithium cobalt oxide is very common in the electronics industry. It's a bit more expensive, but it's very versatile. You can put a lot of voltage into it. You can do a lot of different things with it. So you're going to see that pretty consistently in things like cell phones and other devices. So we wanted to make sure that we touched on LCO with our testing. Then the other area we looked at was the anode. That was actually fairly easy as well. The main anode material out there is graphite. And so the biggest decision we had was whether we were going to use natural graphite or artificial graphite. And artificial graphite dominates the testing, so that's what we chose. With that, we had to pick a couple of anode additives because you have additives that protect the cathode and additives that protect the anode. And I'm about to explain exactly which does what and how. And we chose to use VC and FEC. So that's vinylene carbonate and fluoroethylene carbonate. Vinylene carbonate is one of the oldest anode additives out there. There is a ton of research on it. It's very robust, very good. Fluoroethylene carbonate is newer and somewhat of an upgrade to VC in certain areas. In fact, NMC 811, a lot of folks began to benchmark FEC blends into NMC 811 to look for value. And obviously you have the Ascend additive for the cathode, Trinohex Ultra. So once we have all this defined for our testing package, the next thing we have to do is actually prove where Trinohex Ultra is reacting. Is it reacting at the anode or is it reacting at the cathode? So it's pretty simple to do that. The reaction is basically either a passivation at the anode or oxidation at the cathode, but the whole thing is called the formation. So every single battery goes through this thing called the formation. You put all the components together, you put the liquid chemistry in there, you apply voltage. The first thing you start to see is voltage graph versus cumulative capacity. When you graph this, you get to see these fluctuations or changes in the voltage curve, and that is actually the passivation or the reactions occurring at the anode or at the cathode. The anode passivates first. It passivates at lower voltage. So when you see those curves or those changes occurring at the lower voltage below your 3 to 3.6 range, then you can consider those to be reactions occurring at the anode. This is called forming an SEI or a solid electrolyte interface layer. Okay. Now, it's kind of tough to see these the way they're presented in raw data, but if you take the derivative of these lines, you get peaks, very nice peaks actually, that help us prove what's happening in the battery. So what you can see here is the first thing we test is the electrolyte by itself. That's in that lime green line, or what my wife likes to call the Seahawks green. And you can see that the line comes up right around that 2.8 volts, right here where you see the line start to shift, all right? And it creates the peak, drops back down, and then remains on its curve. That is the end of the reactions occurring at the anode, or that passivation cycle. So then we add to the electrolyte solution 1% in dark blue and 2% in light blue of Trinohex Ultra. And what you see is a change in the height, but not a change in the area under the curve, which is what's important to determine whether a reaction is occurring. So this proves that Trinohex Ultra by itself is not reacting at the anode. However, you have to take it a step farther and actually passivate the anode with an anode additive. So vinylene carbonate was the additive that we chose. And you can see on the graph on the right, the black line indicates that vinylene carbonate is, again, definitely passivating the anode. And if you notice, it's passivating it earlier than the electrolytes. It's reacting earlier than those electrolytes, which is good. That's what you want to see. And then with the red line, we add the Trinohex Ultra in, and you see no change at all in the line. So this proves to us that Trinohex Ultra is not doing any reactions or performing any reactions at the anode. Why do we want to do this? Well, there are a lot of companies out there that are working on alternate anode materials to graphite. Silicone is one of them, and it's definitely a rising star. And then there's also some other ones out there like LTO, lithium tantalite oxide, and a few others. And so when they're building their recipes and they're building their batteries, they need to be able to determine, where these chemicals are going to react in their formulation. If they have a really good anode additive package already, they just need to prove their cathode additive, then this would be a great one for them to check out. So now if you've proven that there's no reactions at the anode, you still have to go ahead and prove that there's something happening at the cathode. So the way we do that is through measuring overcharge voltage drop, all right? Reactions at the cathode are typically oxidation reactions, and you can have a lot of these oxidation reactions occur. If you get a lot of these reactions at the cathode, you get self-discharge of the battery, all right, which essentially is a voltage drop over time. And so self-discharge correlates directly to additional reactions occurring. So on the graph on the left, what you can see in pink or purple, depending on what you determine that color to be, the electrolytes by themselves have a baseline of voltage drop over time. And then when you add Trinohex Ultra by itself, you can see that line drop. That proves that reactions are occurring. Now, when you look at the vinylene carbonate being above the electrolyte, that is also an indication that reactions aren't occurring at the cathode because the reactions are occurring at the anode. So it correlates very, very well in understanding where the reactions are actually happening. This is called forming a CEI, or a cathode electrolyte interface layer. And in this case, you can't stop here, because the first thing someone's going to say is, well, you added that to your battery and your voltage drop got worse, all right? Which is why we have the graph on the right. Once you actually put your formula together, your total package together, you want to show charts with and without your additive to prove that you are getting a better OCV drop than without. So the graph on the right, the dark grays are your FEC, and the cathode additive in those tests is succinonitrile, or SN. FEC and SN are very, very common in a lot of Korean and Asian peninsula-based batteries. And so you can see in the dark green, when we replace SN with Trinohex Ultra, you see a drop in the bar, and that is exactly what you want. Now, the light gray and the light green, we wanted to showcase just dropping Trinohex Ultra in, or adding it to the recipe you already have. So there we had vinylene carbonate and MMDS, which is methylene methane disulfonate. Very common in some NMC 622 lower voltage batteries. And as you can see, dropping in Trinohex Ultra improved your OCV drop in everything but NCA, which is all right. NCA is a different type of cathode chemistry. But if you take a look at replacing MMDS completely, in the bars in blue, you definitely see a competitive advantage for OCV drop. So why do all these make, or why are all of these valuable? The very next thing you're going to measure is your first cycle coulombic efficiency. So they basically, you've charged the battery up, you've formed the battery, all right? You're taking a look at what you have left based on your design. So the batteries we designed for our research and development purposes were about 320 milliamp hour batteries. So as you can see in a lot of these graphs, we're somewhere between the 85 to 87, and in some cases we get up to that 88, 89% level for first cycle coulombic efficiency. Coulombic efficiency is very simply your discharge capacity over your charge capacity, all right? And if you get about an 87% FCCE, then you're looking at about 278 of those milliamp hours. You had 320, and right after formation, you're down to 278. So first cycle coulombic efficiency, you want to stay very high. OCV drop, you want low. First cycle coulombic Coulombic efficiency you want high, okay? So as you can see from the results, anywhere where we added Trinohex Ultra in green, we saw an improvement in Coulombic efficiency. We wanted to show two different things here. First, that you got those improvements across a range of voltage. So you can see NMC 622 at 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4 volts, which is an increase in energy density. And also across various chemistries, NMC 622, 811, and NCA. And in this case, you'll actually see a significant improvement in NCA when Trinohex Ultra is added. All right. So this is kind of a great place to point out that you're going to collect a lot of data and a lot of different tests, and some are going to be good and some are going to be bad. And it's up to the customer to evaluate the actual or benchmark the actual value that they're going to need in their battery system. So I'm going to move forward into something else that's very important. It's called gas reduction. Every battery in formation generates gas, and every battery has to be opened up, the gas removed, and sealed back up before it goes out the door. Okay, so gas reduction is a very important thing. There's a lot of companies that have a history of issues with managing gas, and when the gas occurs, you can actually get an expansion of the battery. One of the more susceptible batteries to gas is the pouch cell. And the pouch cell is used quite a bit in a lot of different applications. So gas reduction is very important. So we decided to do a strategic set of tests in LCO, lithium cobalt oxide, at around 4.5 volts. And we benchmarked this against propane saltone. And the interesting thing here is that propane saltone had to be dosed at 4x the level of Trinohex Ultra to keep it into the same range. And Trinohex Ultra still outperformed propane saltone in all areas of gas reduction, and also outperformed propane saltone in the capacity retention that it had in each of the different additive packages tested. So in these graphs, I don't know if the pointer actually moves. In these graphs, you can see all these data points where Trinohex Ultra outperformed, and that was a phenomenal across the board set of tests. So this is very good, but this is LCO. So we wanted to go ahead and expand the chemistry. And so here you can see results where we benchmarked Trinohex Ultra in various additive blends over here. And in each case, you can see a drop in gas formed, and in some cases, a pretty drastic drop, depending on the nickel or cobalt content. And it's very interesting that the gas reduction is basically standard across all cathode chemistries. Which is interesting to point out here is LFP is at a much lower voltage, so you see a lot less gas generated. So you see the effects are a lot smaller, but still there's a value. We've begun a study to look at exactly what gases we are suppressing and quantitate those numbers. And so you can see here in the bottom right, we've already identified about 7 of those molecules ranging from CO to CO2, methane, and several others. There are more to identify, and we are working to do that. And hopefully in about a couple of months, we'll have a very detailed report that will show exactly what gases we're able to suppress with our molecule package. So that's a lot of the science. So now we're just going to kind of relax a little bit and talk about results. So one of the standard things is long-term cycling. And so we're going to look at long-term cycling in the NMC cathodes. Very standard, but very fun to look at, because when I pop this up on the screen, you see 1,400 cycles. And we're only at 90% of the original capacitance. So when we traveled the world in 2019, I put about 65,000 miles in the air on planes, traveling all around the world, talking to OEMs and battery manufacturers and various customers. You know, the OEMs or EV industry told us that the standard testing was to be able to hit 500 cycles and be above 80% of the original capacitance over here. All right. And so it's awesome to go ahead and put a test together that shows, you know, you're out at 1,400 and you're just about at 90%. That's great. But what that also means is I have to run those cells for a very long time to get the result that I'm looking for, which is that improvement that Trinohex Ultra is providing. So here you can see in the top that normalized capacity. And both of these cells are running just fine out past 1400. It looks like, I would say, in NMC 622 at 4.2 volts, the combination of vinylene carbonate, MMDS and TCH looks better than the fluoroethylene carbonate and the SN. I could probably say that. But if you ask me to give you the difference between these lines, statistically, I don't really think there's any. Even down here in the bottom. So delta V is really looking at what's known as impedance growth. And impedance growth just affects that electron moving around inside the battery. And so you want these top lines to stay very high and flat. And you want these bottom lines, your impedance growth, to stay very low and flat. So maybe you could say that there's some things happening out here in the 1200 to 1400 range, and you're starting to see some of that benefit of Trinohex Ultra. But still, as a scientist and statistical relevance, these lines are all pretty flat. And the reason I'm okay saying that is because we're going to go ahead and up the voltage on the 622. So here you see NMC 622 at 4.3 volts. You start to see some of the behavior shift. All right, some of the curves are a little bit different. You're starting to see some separation. Again, here you want to see the lines staying high and flat, and down here you want to see them staying low and flat, right? So again, these are out here at 500 cycles. These tests started later than our NMC 622 4.2 volt cells, okay? And so I don't really want to make any calls because this could change drastically when this number of cells have doubled. But still, what you're not seeing is a drastic fall off in battery performance. And that's really what we're looking for. Now, 4.4 gets a little bit rough. This is a really harsh environment. We're out here at 40 degrees Celsius. I think standard testing is around 20, 25 degrees Celsius, and we're up at 4.4 volts. And this means that we're getting as many reactions as we can possibly put into these batteries. And so as you can see, we're out here at 500 cycles, and we are starting to see some things start to occur. I would definitely say I can easily see a difference down here in the impedance growth of the FEC-SN blend versus the FEC-TCH blend. One really important thing to point out is at 500 cycles, how close these lines are or below where they're at the 4.2. Okay, so those are definite trends that are easy to see, and this is great data for potential customers or potential companies trying to develop better batteries to take a look at. And so, does anybody else see this bar in the middle? Is there a way I can move this? There it goes. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So the real world study is very important in that the R&D cells are great to test, but they have a slightly different loading. They're all pouch cells. And if you really want to turn around and characterize kilowatts to kilograms, you really need to standardize it in a known battery. So we chose 18650s, and we chose 18650s with an NMC 622 cathode at 4.2 volts, which is a well-known type of 18650. And so here we are. These have not been on test for very long, only about 250 to 300 cycles, and everything looks pretty much perfect. Okay, nothing detrimental occurring. So this is a great checkup test. We're going to let these run until we see the value. I'm predicting for these 18650s that we're not going to actually see the split till about 800 or 900 cycles, and that these will run pretty far into the thousands of cycles. This is the slide. Okay. This is a great, so we have now switched from NMC 622 to 811. And the reason I like this slide is because we decided to go ahead and leave a bad set of cells on this graph to show you what it would look like if the chemistry in the battery just did not work. Now, and I'm really happy that it's vinylene carbonate and MMDS, because MMDS works great in the NMC 622, but it does not work great at the even higher nickel concentration. And so this is the perfect depiction of the difficulty of developing chemistries for these batteries. Here you have a molecule that works great in 622, change it slightly to 811, and it does terrible. No matter what we throw at it, I can add Trinohex Ultra to MMDS, it does not react well in 811. So that's this red line here. And then also we benchmarked the 811s with the FEC-SN blend. And as you can see, the VC Trinohex Ultra, the vinylene carbonate Trinohex Ultra blend won out here in these tests, hitting about 800 cycles at that 80% capacity. So this is good. You can also kind of correlate. There's not a whole lot of impedance growth differences between these either, but you can still see that rapid change in impedance growth with that VC MMDS blend. So this is a great slide. These are actually our batteries on test up at Novonix in Canada. They're the company we partnered with to do a lot of this research. They're a phenomenal company. They are really invested in taking on whatever challenge can be thrown at them for trying to improve batteries. And these are actually ours up there on test. They were nice enough to give us some pictures of them. So keeping moving forward, we're going to jump over to LFP here. So LFP, long-term cycling, again, very similar. Like I said, this is like a punching bag, and we're going to have to go into the 9th inning before we're going to really see these cells start to move around. You can start to see a split in the two different recipes, which is totally normal. But before we actually see some significant change within those recipe sets, we're going to have to get a few hundred more cycles in. As you can see, propane sultone is being outperformed by TCH in LFP. That's actually pretty awesome considering the toxicity of propane sultone. So propane sultone is one of those hazardous materials that is being phased out. It's already banned in Europe. So this is great to show that we're a very competitive replacement to propane sultone for both gas reduction and for long-term cycling. The graph on the right, the delta V graph, is showing you the impedance growth issues that propane sultone is also bringing up here in lithium iron phosphate. Now, earlier I mentioned lithium iron phosphate playing a role in grid energy storage. There's a company in China called BYD. BYD has published a lot of reports around lithium iron phosphate, and you can actually go look those up. You can look up BYD and grid energy storage. And the way this was explained to me is just very simply the battery the size of a house that's strategically positioned within the electrical power grid to balance and protect the grid from failure. So grid energy storage is a collection method used for energy grids at a very large scale. Something I would think would be very similar to this is hydroelectric facilities, where they can collect energy in peak production hours and then distribute that energy in peak consumption hours. And that's kind of the plan, and it's being implemented in China already and in some other places to help stabilize electrical grids when there's 50 million electric vehicles in the central time zone, and everybody goes home at 5 o'clock and plugs in their car. You know, that's going to cause a lot of issues, and these types of devices are going to help stabilize that. So we're also working in other industries to help move EVs forward. One other note, which is a little bit of a sidebar, Ascend is also looking to help Department of Transportation agencies across the country improve road conditions and increase durability and weather resistance in roads, because a lot of states have a gas tax. And as electric vehicles increase, the gas tax revenue is going to shift, or it's going to change. Also, electric vehicles weigh a lot more than the average car, so the weight on the road is going to increase. So we have a lot of chemicals and a lot of formulations that we're launching that are going to help drastically improve road conditions. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and so I am extremely familiar with really bad roads. So I'm going to move forward a little bit here. We're going to move into high temp storage and cycling. So high temp storage is very important. It just looks at your energy density over time. So the standard tests here in industry are about 500 hours and about 60 degrees Celsius. So again, we benchmarked NMC 622. We went to 4.3 volts, which was standard, and you can see the improvement that Trinohex Ultra makes over vinylene carbonate alone. It is a drastic improvement, and you can also see Trinohex Ultra improve the formula of vinylene carbonate and propane saltone. So that's very good, and that's also very predicted. Trinohex Ultra is a very high boiling molecule, very high flash point, so it really provides a lot of stability to the battery system in these conditions. What's also really cool to point out is the opposite effect you see in lithium iron phosphate. Because the voltage is so low there in that test, you don't really see a lot of separation. You don't really see a lot of advantage. All the lines and all the formulas seem to be in the same place, right? So it's another great way to point out that you can't just do one test to show the value that your molecule could create in lithium ion batteries. You have to do multiple tests and kind of look at the whole picture to get the total value. The next thing we're going to look at is high temp cycling. And so here you see a very new set of data that we put together. These are only about 100 cycles in, but they're very aggressive conditions. So I expect to get another 300 to 400 cycles into this set of tests and see some very drastic changes in our overall capacity versus our impedance. You're already starting to see some very interesting things occur with impedance growth, especially with the propane saltone. So I would say another couple hundred cycles here, and you're really going to see some value created with Trinohex Ultra with the stability of the overall system. So low temperature cycling. This is one of my favorite slides. I just love looking at that car frozen in the snow and sitting in Houston and knowing I'll never have to worry about that. 0 degree cycling is very important. This is a set of tests that really separates a lot of additives. A lot of additives become very viscous at low temperatures, and that just impedes electrons from moving around. However, Trinohex Ultra doesn't actually freeze until negative 23 degrees Celsius. So it is able to still perform very well at 0 degrees C. So as you can see from the tests, especially here in impedance growth, when you add Trinohex Ultra, you actually get a drop in impedance and it provides an additional value. So this would actually be very interesting for NASA because they've done a lot of tests with low temperature cycling. This is definitely my favorite slide. So in our travels in 2019, we spent a lot of time in Asia and some time over in China. And before we got there, we spent a bunch of time in Europe, in the United States, being told that the standard test was 80% of the original capacitance at 500 cycles. And at the time that we went to China, we were 300 to 400 cycles in, and we were praying that we would hit that 500 cycle mark and that 80% capacitance. And we obviously did in many places, but we hadn't gotten there yet. So we were still nervous. And then we got to China and they said, nope, it's 1500 cycles and 80% of the original capacitance. And we looked around at each other thinking that this was a milestone we were just not going to ever be able to achieve. So we came back, we put our heads together, we looked at some of our chemistry, we picked some NMC 622 again at 4.2 volts. We designed some new cells and we said, let's let them run and let's see what happens. And lo and behold, we were shocked. We reduced the charging and discharging rate so that we could get the research out faster. But we were absolutely shocked at what we saw. And here we are sitting at about 2,500 cycles and they're still running strong. Right now, the math is predicting a lot of these cells to get out to the 5,000 cycle range. So what does that actually mean? Let's just pretend that a car and these batteries are equal in part, and that would therefore be about 13.7 years out of that car battery. But then let's add some other numbers to that. Let's say that this battery pack designed to hit this number can achieve about 300 miles in between charges. Well, that gets you out to about 1.5 million miles. So that's how this data correlates into value. I'm sure you've heard about 1 million mile batteries. especially with Tesla's battery day a week or so, or 2 weeks ago. So this is really fun. This is really cool stuff to me. Being able to convert this information into real world activity is really nice. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is high rate testing. And high rate testing is very simple. That's your fast charging. Okay. So one thing before I actually go through this slide, Ascend is very keen on safety. We have goal zero campaigns at all of our manufacturing facilities, and we don't just care about safety internally. We care about it externally as well with any of the testing facilities that we use. So we sat down with Novonix to take a look at the safety side of trying to charge and discharge these batteries at about 6C, which really equals 10 minutes. And we decided that this could not be done safely, or at least we didn't think it could be done safely in the pouch cell format. So we actually switched these over to the 18650 cells. So this is more of a real world test anyway, and we were happy with that. What we were also very pleasantly surprised in that Trinohex Ultra supported fast cycling up to 6C, which is that 10-minute mark, that 10-minute charge, 10-minute discharge. And it was really exciting to find out how much stability it provided in these tests. So as you can see, a lot of these discharge capacity tests, you don't see any of that rapid destruction. If you had an issue, you would see this line get about 2 or 3 cycles in and just drop straight off. Okay, so very great data. Trinohex Ultra supports fast cycling. So now we've kind of hit on all of the different value props, and you can really paint a good picture for someone who's trying to improve their battery. You can talk to them about where the additive is reacting, how it's going to affect impedance growth, how it's going to help them with fast charging or high temperature storage, or whether it's an energy storage device versus a car battery cycling. It's kind of the full picture that really helps have a good conversation and help your customer improve a battery. And that is it. I do have some backup slides, but I want to be respectful of time and of everyone. I am more than happy to stay on the phone as long as anybody wants to this evening and talk about batteries. This is something I'm very passionate about, something I really enjoy. And I will go ahead and stop sharing so I can see all of your lovely faces again.
All right, very good, Jeff. And yeah, the passion obviously comes through, but I think our world really needs better batteries.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, seeing Eric's video there, of course, in Canada, you're kind of at the opposite end from where Novonix is at of Canada, but it's nice to read about the battery research going on in Nova Scotia over there. As you probably know, Tesla is working with folks in Canada over in Nova Scotia as well.
We actually interviewed Jeff Don to get a better understanding of a lot of the baseline research we wanted to do. He was very helpful in helping us determine our initial recipes, and he's a very interesting guy. Always wore jeans. It was nice.
Okay, so he's casual. That's good.
Yes, he is. Very good guy.
But yeah, we know that you'd mentioned grid storage. I mean, that's going to be huge going forward. Something that some folks have heard me say before, but I know that you haven't heard. The Houston Energy Group had a speaker, and he was a lawyer, and he said that his biggest number of clients coming in, a title lawyer for land, the biggest number of clients coming in, they were looking for locations next to electrical substations. They wanted to buy property. And the reason they wanted to do it was because they wanted to locate batteries, tie them to the grid. And, that was an economic, viably platform. And so, yeah, they knew the batteries were coming, the better batteries. So it's great that you and Ascend are doing that.
I had to scrub a lot of the customer specific information out of the presentation. And Dave knows and Emma knows that this presentation was actually approved through our marketing and legal team in only a few days ago. It took a long time to pull all this stuff where it needed to be, but there are a lot of great articles out there, and I can talk about those freely public articles, those conversations I've had with various folks in the world. And I would encourage folks to definitely take a look at some of the reports that BYD over in China has put out about grid energy storage devices and the use of lithium iron phosphate. I honestly believe that they're onto something very big that's going to really change the electrical grids and the stability of the grids. And I think it's already being adopted in Europe and at least being tested over there.
And I see a comment from John Atwood. John, of course, is great at getting hands-on experience with batteries and putting them on things that devices that the rest of us might not normally, such as, for example, converting a lawnmower from gasoline to electric. So I see John's comment there. Wow, an amazing amount of info. I just learned a lot. Certainly we all did. You had mentioned 1.5 million mile batteries.
Yes.
All, the million miles. So let's go beyond a million miles. Let's go.
So it's a very interesting conversation. A lot of the scientists that we work with at Novonix, by the way, I love Novonix, and the scientists up there are great, and a lot of them are actually graduates from Dalhousie University. So they're a phenomenal area of understanding around these things. It's quite simple. You know, you've got the weight of the car and the power output of the battery and how many times it can cycle, and that'll tell you how many miles that battery can actually go. And so we put that equation together, and I can't honestly say if that battery can go 1.5 million miles, but it's a theoretical equation that you can use to say if the weight ratio was right, if the battery pack was big enough, then this battery will cycle that long. And that means 1.5 million miles, or about 13.7 years of use. I think that makes it. That'll work out.
And on top of that, some of us, of course, baby our batteries in our cars, not charging all the way up, not discharging all the way down, so that you're not even getting a whole cycle every time you're charging. You're just using a portion of a life cycle. And so, yeah, and of course, there are a lot of folks that do that. And the more folks that are driving EVs and learning about, how to drive them responsibly, I think we'll see more of that. So I think one of the things that kind of dissuaded people from doing battery swaps was just exactly that. How careful were people with the batteries? If I'm going to turn in my battery that I've taken good care of, am I going to get a not so well taken care of battery back? And so the battery swap stations never really panned out. So Kevin, I see you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks so much for all the information. My goodness, it's encouraging to see, all of the research, all of the work that goes behind these great technologies that we use. And you made a little bit of a comment about, everybody getting to the house at 5 o'clock and plugging in their EVs. The EVs are actually part of the solution. The utilities will and have already started marketing campaigns and will actually use incentive rates to get EV drivers to be part of the solution. So instead of charging as soon as you get home, with these 250-mile plus cars, people will actually set their timers to charge and actually have with smart charging stations actually that are networked. These cars will come on when the grid wants them to, and that's just on the charging side. On the vehicle to grid delivery side, you're going to make, like you said, you're operating your maybe it was the Bye Aerospace gentleman. You're going to be operating these batteries in the central part of the charging segment, somewhere between 30% and 70% state of charge, and you can actually deliver to the grid, and they'll pay handsomely for that. So the monetary incentives, EVs are a great part of the storage and quality assurance of the grid. We've got I'm invested in a company, Key Capture Energy, that's already got multiple projects all over the country on storage, and so it's happening. It's actually very, very exciting. I wanted to ask you on your when you make the statement, you said reaction. Does that term in battery terms mean that there's actually material being moved in the cathode, around the cathode, off of the cathode? Is this when you see the dendrites being formed and these kind of things?
I think the answer is going to be yes. There's a lot of chemistry going on inside the battery when it's turned on. That's not just electrons moving from the anode to the cathode and creating energy. When the CEI and the SCIs are formed, there is an unbelievable number of new molecules formed in that CEI and SCI. I put together a very simplistic model just to kind of hone in on Trinohex Ultra, but I have seen some very interesting diagrams that have dozens of different new molecules generated through reactions with the electrolyte solvents, the conducting salts themselves, and the different additives that are mixed within the liquid chemistry around the battery. So depending on what that recipe looks like, you do get a significant number of side reactions occurring, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, is basically the point of the overall chemistry conversation. And if you can push a lot of the reactions towards the good, create a stronger, more robust CEI, then you can really prevent that degradation of the cathode, and as well as the decomposition of the electrolyte, because a lot of the electrolyte solution can break down with all the oxygens that are built up in the carbonates. They can create water, they can create HF, as the lithium hexafluorophosphate breaks down, you can get some HF generation. The HF then attacks the cathode, and the whole thing is very cyclic in nature, and that also then begins to cause the degradation and performance of the battery.
Yeah, I was thinking that, you know, one of the big topics with batteries is the full circle process, which includes the recycling of these materials. And one of the things that I think from hearing your presentation, that complicates recycling is that all of these materials get placed into the cell in a very orderly manner, and as the cell matures and gets used through its cycle life, all of these materials get migrated and combined into other things that wind up making the recycle process more an interesting challenge. And I'm sure that they're looking into that, and the materials are still there. It's just how much energy and chemistry you have to put into getting it all back out.
I actually have a lot of confidence in that. I was at the AABC show in San Diego in 2019, and I got to listen to several pretty interesting conversations and presentations on the recycling of batteries. So you can actually go and take a look at the content from the 2019 AABC show in San Diego. You should be, you may have to pay a fee to get the content, but there should be a way for you to download that content and some of those presentations, and hopefully you can see. I actually have my flyers somewhere, and so I wish I had that handy. I could actually tell you exactly who gave the presentation on the recycling of the batteries. But I actually have a high level of confidence in that. They had some really unique and interesting solutions to those problems.
Absolutely. I mean, look, JB Strobel is just one of them. There's tons of really great, smart people. He's probably the most known that's gone into 100% on the recycling side to figure out the full circle of recycling these vehicles, these batteries, so that because the sustainability aspect of mining all this material and getting to several billion vehicles is a challenge. So you're going to have to recycle the material and get it back into the supply chain to make it much more sustainable. There's no doubt, and it will get done.
And that's another great point. One of the issues in the chemistry world, in the additive world, is the supply of the various additives that perform well. And so Ascend and Trinohex Ultra, we actually have enough Trinohex Ultra to supply to 50 electric vehicles, 50 million new electric vehicles a year. Sorry.
I'm glad you
So,
added that million.
well, I've been talking for an hour, so
I know,
but
thank you.
yeah, so that is a unique thing. And when you show up to speak to a customer and you have the science, but you also have the supply chain and the logistics, global logistics is also important, then that makes a very big difference, because you're not adding any more costs on to the battery manufacturer for any of those other issues.
In
That's
fact,
great.
talking about supply chain, I see from John Atwood the question: do you think Tesla would be interested in this additive cells? And he's laughing.
So I really got to stay away from any customer specific questions.
Okay, yeah, we don't
I
want to get you in trouble. So
I will say I do believe that Tesla would be interested in our additive.
okay. Yes, okay. I see Ken Jones. You have a question.
I do, Jeff. I'm wondering about rehabilitating batteries or rebuilding them in some fashion. So current batteries now as they degrade, and then trying to build them back up. Do you have any comments?
I do. I actually ruined several really good Ryobi batteries in my garage trying to play with this. Um, so the issue with regenerating batteries versus recycling batteries is that as you get a lot of these reactions that occur, the increase in self-discharge, you're actually moving, lithium ion to metal, and moving it from cathode to anode, and you're getting a lot of these bad reactions that occur. And a lot of those are irreversible in the form of the battery. But that's where the recycling comes in, and they can actually do some things to reverse it. So a lot of the damage to the battery is irreversible, but it just depends on how long you want to use it for. So like the industry standard, the OEM automotive industry standard that we had was 500 cycles and 80% of the original capacitance. But that doesn't mean that battery couldn't run down at 70 and 60% and just require more charging time,
Yeah.
So it's kind of a trade-off, and it depends. But in a lot of what I've seen with these batteries, the detriment that they go through is pretty irreversible.
I understand. Thank you.
Get unmuted here. The way I understand it, Jeff, you're next door neighbor to Emma.
Emma is 1, 2, 3, 4 houses down. I can see
Okay.
Emma's beautiful solar panels from my back patio. I'm very envious. I actually signed up for the Southeast Houston Co-op, and
Good.
it was very interesting. The gentleman was explaining the package and started to talk about batteries that could also be installed to store energy here. And of course, my first question was, what's the battery made out of? And he was telling me who makes the battery, and I was conceptualizing what it might be made out of and how I could tweak it and maybe make it better. So, but yeah, very interesting. And Emma's right over there. We've visited her at her place, and she's come over here.
Yeah, I can imagine. So beyond Powerwall, I know that there's other vendors that are producing batteries that are being put into PV systems on houses. But yeah, I kind of wonder how much a person who's kind of just more on the sales and installation side would really know, cycle life and other
Yeah,
characteristics of batteries.
I feel bad for beating those guys up when they're presenting some information, because I always want more and they don't have it, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and go ahead, Ken. You got a question?
So it is true that you could take new batteries and put additives into them that would actually benefit them, and you know something about being able to do that, correct?
When you say taking a new battery and putting an additive in it, do you mean a battery after formation or before formation?
after formation.
After formation, okay. It's more difficult to alter the chemistry inside a battery after formation. I actually have not tried. I would like to try. Um, I don't have any equipment to do that here, and it might be something interesting that we do with Novonix in time. But before formation, it is extremely easy to adjust chemistry, especially if it's liquid chemistry. Cathodes and anodes, much more difficult. You actually have to disassemble and
Yeah.
change. But liquid chemistry, in the case of Trinohex Ultra, I think I need to clarify. Trinohex Ultra can be dropped in at any time. Some other additives may have to be blended properly with the electrolyte solution and added earlier on. Okay, so Trinohex Ultra, good to go anytime before formation. After formation, I'm not necessarily sure, but that would be definitely interesting to find out.
Well,
I
when
can
you're
imagine
talking
some
about,
people are, I was just going to say, thinking of their car lead acid batteries. I mean, for decades, people have been adding things to their lead acid batteries to make them last. Go ahead, Kevin.
well, just thinking of the power walls that you're talking about with respect to solar panel installations, and you recognizing that it might be possible to tweak batteries that have yet to be installed, seems like a natural thing for you guys to do. And I'm wondering if it has actually been done yet with success and safety.
I understand. I understand the question. Okay, so Ascend is more of at least on my end. So the liquid chemistry end, we're that supplier, that additive supplier. We will go speak to electrolyte solution formulators. We will also speak to battery cell manufacturers, and we'll also speak to OEMs so that everybody can do some testing and benchmark our material in. And depending on who you talk to, the OEMs, the auto manufacturers will tell you that they control the specs for the battery. And then the cell manufacturers will turn around and tell you that they control the specs for the battery. So we stay out of all of that and basically remain a supplier to that. We don't actually get to touch final product downstream. That's all on the cell manufacturer and all on the OEM side. The testing, though, that I have to do to develop the additive has to go all the way to that scale so that the battery cell manufacturers or the OEMs can see what's going to happen when this additive is added to their package and it's then put in a car or it's then put in a laptop, etc. Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good, good. So I can only just imagine what's going through John Atwood's head right now, thinking about batteries. He'd probably love to get some of the new ones with your additive so that he could try them out on some of his projects. So,
Hey,
I'm more than
Dave.
happy.
yes, Kevin.
I actually took apart. I've done it a couple of times. A lithium iron phosphate Thunder Sky prismatic cell, and it's really interesting. And I think that I would like to do a presentation on that for the group. And I'd like to maybe wait until we can meet again because it's really interesting to see the migration of the materials within the cell. It's very interesting. You can see the primarily the copper anode that migrates through the separator, actually impregnates itself into the separator, and what's left of the anode is this very porous copper brittle structure instead of a nice foil sheet. So anyways, I just it's such a visualization of what he talks about in the way that the materials actually change in the cell, which is why, you know, Ken, you were asking about repairing the cells. It's very, very difficult. You have to do you would have to do some kind of a chemical, but almost physical reversal of the process because these materials, they react and they move, physically move. And to get them to go back to where they originally were placed is extremely difficult, but it's really interesting. I'd like to do that for the group at some point.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be very worthwhile. Yeah. So Jeff, thinking about the different temperature cycling and such that your batteries have gone and tested through, and thinking about some of the cars some of our members have had, such as air-cooled Nissan Leafs versus a number of other manufacturers who use liquid cooling, do you think that we'll ever get to a point where we can simplify the cars and that air cooling will be sufficient because the batteries will be able to handle the tougher environment?
I think so. I think that we will get to the point where the chemicals that are used or the style of lithium ion battery that is used or lithium metal battery will be sufficient to solve the heat issues that batteries have. That's one of the valuable things that we've learned about Trinohex Ultra with its extremely high 400 degrees C boiling point and very high flash point. Provides a lot of that stability at low concentrations in the battery package. So I'm sure that there are more chemicals out there that can replace some of the carbonate solvents and do that same thing. So I definitely believe that that's the way it's moving, and that will occur.
Hey, Jeff.
Great, good.
Hi, Emma.
Yeah, this is a great presentation. A lot of dense material, a lot of chemistry, which a lot of it went over my head. But you mentioned about using the additive to kind of solve the issue of the gas and the swelling of the battery pack. So is Ascend working also with a lot of the companies that make the laptop batteries and batteries for phones? I know you can't talk specifics about who you're working with, but yeah, that seems like that's another rich environment.
Yes, the short answer is yes. And we've been in a few studies looking at the performance of Trinohex Ultra and the improvement of gassing in cell phone batteries. We actually did one, well, let me stop there. The thing is, a lot of electronics have the pouch cell, right? And that pouch cell, if I would have planned better, I would have had. We actually have some models and some mock-ups of some of these cells that we made, and we've actually cut them apart. So when Kevin does his presentation, tie me into that, and I'll bring some of these models because they're pre-chemical and pre-charged, so you can actually see what they look like before, and then he can show you what they look like after. But they're very flexible, very flimsy. So Ascend is actually looking into strengthening the pouch cell and also improving the separator. And so the gassing there is very important. And so we've definitely been in several studies, and we've engaged in several areas to help improve the battery issues in the electronics industry. And we believe we're going to have a pretty big impact there.
Well, good, because I always have to tell people, they think of the battery that wears out within 2 years in their cell phone, and they're nervous about buying an electric vehicle thinking that it's the same thing. And I tell them, nope, completely different. The word lithium might be in both types of batteries, but you're not buying a car that's just full of the same types of batteries that are in your cell phone. Mm-hmm. So your company addresses the electronics industry as well. That's good. Because,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's need for improvement there.
Yep. Yeah, we have the volume for the EV industry, but we are trying to help electrification overall. We could have another Ascend person come and give a presentation on the nylon side, where we've launched multiple platforms and very interesting. There was that slide I couldn't spend a lot of time on. That slide itself is an entire presentation of different parts and pieces where Ascend is working hard to help improve electric vehicles and electrification.
Good. Actually, thinking about the sizes of the industry, which is bigger, the electronics industry with all the millions of cell phones that get produced, or billions maybe by now per year, or the EV industry in terms of quantity of battery, whether you do it volumetrically or however you might want to.
So I
Each
saw
cell phone is small, but they add up.
this is a really great question, and I actually saw somebody put together a unique slide on what they thought it was. It was based on cathode chemistry, and so this is information in 2018. But in 2018, LCO, which dominates the electronic industry, also dominated the pounds of material used to create batteries. But right behind that, not too far, was NMC. So NMC is going to really dominate the EV world. And then a portion of it was LMO, which is just the lithium manganese oxide, and NCA and LFP. Okay. So I imagine if I could see this data for 2020 and projections for 2021, I would imagine that NMC has grown. A lot of electric vehicles have hit the roads since 2018, but it still could be pretty close. But the auto industry is going to overtake the electronic industry for lithium ion battery usage in just call it on a pound for pound basis very, very quickly.
Yes, I believe so too. But it's kind of similar in the way that wafers that went into solar cells back in the old days were the reject wafers from the electronics industry. You know, they're making out grids of chips on those wafers and cutting those chips apart and mounting them in containers and such. And the PV industry just got the leftovers, the ones that weren't quite pure enough and so forth. And of course, now it's just way, in terms of quantity of wafers, of course, you get a lot of chips off of a single wafer, and the wafers have gotten bigger. But just in terms of area, you need a lot more to make PV worthwhile. And yeah, so now, of course, wafers are made directly for the PV industry. And we've seen that change. And I fully believe, as you said, that the car industry, and especially when we talk about semi trucks and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I did see one positive note that 5 different companies or something in the trucking industry are looking to electrify semis are going to work together on a common charging standard so that you don't have a problem, different makers having different ways to have to charge. And of course, there's lots of batteries in a semi tractor.
Oh, yeah. We got to see, so I got to go to the, it was the battery show in, was it Stuttgart, Germany, in 2019. Don't quote me on that. It might have been Nuremberg. I was in a show in Nuremberg and a show in Stuttgart in 2019. And I got to see some really cool technologies that people are developing, especially for import-export docks, and complete electrification of all of the equipment, forklifts, cranes, operated all in different ways, and all completely autonomous. And they would, as the battery would die out, it would have a point where it would drive off. The piece of the battery would disconnect itself, and it would then go plug itself into a charging station, and another one would drive out, disconnect, and go back into either the forklift or the crane operation. Some of the stuff I got to see was just out of this world, and it was great. And so I honestly believe that the electrification is coming a lot faster than some people may think. And the issues are more around, what's it going to be? Is it really going to be, this type of lithium ion cathode? How quickly is lithium metal going to get here? Et cetera, et cetera. So, and there's also lithium air. I've seen some interesting reports out of Asia, where there's been some advances in this lithium air battery. So I think electrification is coming a lot quicker. And I think really the question is, what kind of electrifications are we going to see?
Well, thinking about the lithium metal and lithium air, does your additive apply to those as well, or?
Great question. Great question. So lithium air, no, but lithium metal, maybe. The biggest thing I saw with lithium metal was how it got away from the flammability issues and some of those degradation issues. And so, due to Trinohex Ultra's extremely high boiling point and flash point and low flammability, and in some cases its lack of flammability, complete lack of flammability, it could be very viable in lithium metal or solid state type. And so we haven't actually started any testing like that, though. We are dedicated right now to liquid chemistry, lithium ion batteries, but we have had some interesting conversations with some people at various conferences and shows. And in the event that the lithium metal type batteries move faster in development, then we will absolutely go ahead and undertake those tests to better understand that.
Very good, very good.
So Jeff, we need to get you into an electric vehicle.
I'm going to steal yours along with your solar panels that I look at all the time.
Coming out for these electric trucks now. So
Oh, yes. So
those.
yes. So just everybody send this to Elon Musk, let he and I become buddies, and he can give me a Cybertruck, or I'm going to get one of these Hummers, these EV Hummers, because there's the commercials that they put out, but there's all kinds of videos and interesting things out there in the YouTube world and on the internet. So I am quite excited about these.
Yep, there's a lot of new products coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Potentially very soon. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And I can tell you that there is a lot of research going on at all of the major OEMs and in all of the major battery manufacturers. There is a very hard push for the electrification. And so that is why I have some very high confidence that it is coming, and it's coming a lot faster than a lot of people think it is.
Well, a lot of us have seen the superior acceleration that electric vehicles provide. And so I could see the writing on the wall a while back. You know, Porsche wasn't going to allow itself to be outdone and just stick with combustion engines because that's what they knew, that's what they did. They're going to say, hey, how can we stay in the lead and be competitive and have cars that people want due to their acceleration and other means. And so, yeah, electrification is coming. Can mean slightly different things to different people. Some are thinking more of a hybrid type of thing. And we saw that with the electric airplane presentation, the larger ones they're talking about with fuel cells, because you get that energy density of a liquid or other type of fuel that you take with you. Just create your electric propulsion system, but when you're trying to get range, you may need to generate, as opposed to using all batteries like you can on the smaller planes to source that electricity. So yeah, that's really good. So and so yeah, it was good that Kevin brought up about his desire to present, and it was good that you said you wanted to chime in when he does that. So that's going to be real exciting. Yeah, it's always good to have some hands-on items for people. Right now, of course, showing things just means on a screen, but as Kevin said, maybe after we can do things in person, and we're all going to stay tuned just in terms of when a vaccine is available. I think we're all hoping that's going to be sooner rather than later. So thank you very much, Jeff. I think this has been great for everybody. I mean, all the hard work that you and your team at Ascend do to keep improving those batteries. So Kevin, were you going to say something?
No, I was just turning on my camera. If we were going to say thank you, I wanted to have my camera on.
Well, I want to
Right.
thank all of you for giving me the time, for letting me do this. I'm very happy to have been able to do it. And if there are any follow-up questions, if anybody wants to have additional conversations, I am more than available to do that.
Thank you.
Very good. Thanks much. And yeah, this has been great for everybody. Really appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned in December, December 6th, Sunday, we're going to have our in-person and virtual holiday celebration. And then on the first Thursday in January, we'll pick up again another virtual with some TBD presenters. And so that'll be exciting too. So thanks, everybody. Any comments on projects or anything that folks want to bring up?
I have a question, Dave. The in-person, is it our dinner? Is it going to be at
Yes, it'll be at Cleburne's and
cafeteria?
it will be
Okay.
probably about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So we'll post the information to nail that down. Robert
Okay.
couldn't get on the video here tonight, but I was communicating with him earlier today. And so he'll work that. And so with distancing, if they get the separate room and folks are separated a significant way and so forth, I think they'll be able to do that, the folks that want to do that. And it's been such a long tradition. I mean, as long as I've known, last century, this club started doing that. So it's kind of unfortunate we can't all get together, but those that can, and the rest will have on some phones or something on the table, and we'll do what we can in December, and then we'll get people talking. So we kind of didn't talk too much about projects this time, but maybe in January we'll emphasize and see what folks have been doing over the winter months in terms of electrifying motorcycles, what kind of battery management systems they've been putting on. The Sweet Brothers are always good. Fortunately, they weren't on tonight to hear you, Jeff, but it's something that they're always good at, taking battery packs out of used Chevy Bolts or wherever and putting their own battery monitoring system on, and that will always give good project information. I think we can all learn from that, just like we all learned from all the good work you're doing, Jeff. I mean, it's just so exciting that there's companies that are doing things that are improving the batteries so that we can all drive farther and have more robust vehicles that'll stay on the road longer. So, all righty, with that, if there's no
about, do we know any more about TXRX?
I have not heard anything more. The last I'd heard through Bill Swan and through Roland is that, yes, we'll be able to use a classroom there. And I think they were going forward with their move over. They were leaving the rented premises that they had and going to the purchased premises. But I haven't heard anything in about a month. So
have you, do you know about an open house they're having, Dave? I think they're going to do like a tour of the facility. I don't know the full, whether it'll be limited, and I'm sure that face mask wearing and all that, but you might contact Bill Swan and find out. It's either this Friday or it's either tomorrow or a Friday this month. I don't know if you want to ping him.
Yeah, I'll contact him. I saw that he was on this telecon earlier, but he's not right now. So yeah, I'll find that out. And it sounds like it's coming up really soon. What you were thinking then? Okay.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that'd be good to get to know it right at the beginning. Of course, if it's similar to the old facility, even after they get up and going, people will be able to get toured around, and I'm sure it'll probably be similar to before you need to be safety checked out to work on certain equipment, things like that. But to see what's available, I'm sure they'll want to let people know about it. So that's good. That sounds like if they're having an open house, and they really are moving quite far ahead with this move to their new location. All right, good. Anything else folks would like to bring up? Again, thank you, Jeff. This has been really good. We hope to see you every week here, of course, too, not just in the presentation chair, but in the learning chairs, and bringing you up on projects and hearing news about someone purchasing a new EV as their personal vehicle. That's always great to hear too. So, all righty.
I have one comment for Jeff. So he talked about us pinging him about battery chemistry. He can ping us about his next EV. I mean, he's got Emma right there, but there's any of us that can help him. We've got all kinds of EVs out there that we drive. So if you have questions about them, just ping us.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And also about
Yeah.
PVs. There are a lot of us that have PVs as well.
Yeah.
Right. Kevin is one of the folks that's got both liquid cooled and air cooled. So yeah. Yep. All righty. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dave. That's great.
Great
Bye-bye.
session. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, speakers.
Yep, sure thing. Mhm.